Keep watching The Politics every Friday.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your product and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Hello, welcome to Parrot TV's The Foreign Policy Review. Thanks for joining us, and subscribe to our channel if you have not already. We're glad to have you as a viewer. We have CARLO, PARCELLI, TOTH, and Billy Bob today as co-hosts, and I welcome them on the show. We're going to have a general discussion, Havoc at home and abroad, and we want to open the show today with a clip from Zelensky. I'm going to pull this up just momentarily. Give me just a second. Here's our family of creatures and intellectuals here. Let me pull up this clip and get it going here. Oops, I didn't switch off. Give me just a second. If you guys want to jump into that, we'll get in.
This is a Zelensky clip where he's basically inviting the U.S., Wall Street, in for a fire sale. Buy anything you want; it's all yours. We're gonna oppress our people. We're gonna bring austerity in. It's gonna be like Haiti in Ukraine as soon as we get our shot at it. So we're gonna sell the country to you.
Here we go.
It is obvious that American business can become the locomotive that will once again push forward global economic growth. We have already managed to attract attention and have cooperation with such giants of the international financial and investment world as BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs. Such American brands as Starlink or Westinghouse have already become part of our Ukrainian way. Your brilliant defense systems, such as HIMARS or Bradleys, are already uniting our history of freedom with your enterprises. We are waiting for Patriots. We are looking closely at Abrams. Thousands of such examples are possible, and everyone can become a big business by working with Ukraine. In all sectors, from weapons and defense to construction, from communication to agriculture, from transport to IT, from banks to medicine. I believe that freedom must always win.
So how do you guys feel about that? Freedom must always win.
Yeah, freedom. Property must always win. He says freedom and property several times. I in 2004 with the first color revolution in Ukraine, and that's just
the orange.
I had a blog, and I was warning these asshole Ukrainians that look, that the United States is going to come in there and they're going to devastate your economy. And sure enough, they became the poorest country in Europe, and especially in Eastern Europe, and that's saying something. And it went on for years, and they haven't caught on. And they're, and they got Nazis with guns to their head. But the point is that what Zelensky was saying was everything is for sale, everything, including the people. I'm directly referring to where I saw the extended version of this clip. It was Ben Norton's show, and I like Ben Norton, multipolarista. Now he's moved over with another group with Michael Hudson, who I also respect a great deal. But Ben missed the key point here. He missed the key point. If Ukraine becomes a wholly owned subsidiary of BlackRock, Westinghouse, Cargill, Raytheon, if they own the country, like they de facto do a lot of the world, like they do Haiti, for example, then if Russia threatens their property, if Russia threatens Wall Street's property directly, Zelensky has it, at least in his mind, that I think, and the other people around him in his circle, that the U.S. will get more involved militarily with the struggle there, which could lead to World War III. So we have to consider that. Now, I will say, if the U.S. corporations who have more sense than the assholes in government by Victoria Nuland and Sullivan and Blinken and all those fucking dickheads, they have more sense and they want to really protect their property, and they go to back off if the Nazis are as fanatical as they appear to be in that country, and don't want to have a negotiated settlement based on the fact that now U.S. corporations own Ukraine. It's not Ukrainians that own it anymore, that they own Ukraine and they want to negotiate. If the fanatical Nazis want to go up against those corporations, more power to them. I'd love to see them dead. I'd love to see all of them dead to the last Nazi in that fucking country. So Ben missed that. He missed that point, that this is seen as a way to involve the U.S. even more in the conflict. I turn it over to my team colleagues.
Bless you.
Yeah, I agree, Carlo. Corporate America doesn't have any loyalty to the Nazis. They'll use them and then they'll turn on them, without missing a beat. I think, normally, a corporate investor is going to be very risk averse. And normally, your typical corporation isn't going to invest in a war zone because there's too much. They don't know how it's going to turn out, and it's a bad, risky investment. And so the fact that they're, going ahead and, pouring money in just kind of proves the class nature of this conflict. That it's all in. It's the Western corporate oligarchy that is fighting Russia, and so normally they're not going to have anything to do with a violent military conflict, and they're not going to be buying land that they don't even know who's going to be owning it at the end of the conflict. But they're happy to do it because they know that they're party to one side of the conflict, and so they're in it to win it. That's my takeaway.
I'd like to jump in then because I see it slightly differently, or maybe missing a point that you're making. Because if we put into context the regions, relax, here, then what is obvious this week, since Europe is now at war with Russia, as Annalena Baerbock, Ms. Gruner has said, because of the tank debacle, where America got a cheap deal. They got together something like 31, I think, Abrams tanks, and now everybody in Western and Northern Europe, not Hungary, not the Serbs, not us, but they are chipping in with, we'll send 14, we'll send 12, we'll send 10. They cobbled together different little things, and it's Europe that is being forced into this. I think it's called a meat grinder, a quagmire, just turning your tanks into junks, and then America can fly in to replace our tanks. That's the American capitalist elite. But they are very averse to actually putting boots on the ground, bodies, jets, whatever you want, carriers, American people into Russia, into Ukraine. I think in Zelensky's mind, they are sure to come now that there are investments. But if you look at that video carefully, he mixes in the three big banks or banking sort of brands with the military stuff. So he puts in the HIMARS, he puts in Elon Musk's Skylink, Starnet, something like that, which is again for the military use. And it's basically what corporations do if they're small. They show on their little website, look at our clientele, look at people who we've worked with, and they just, if they don't have very many, then they put up 3 or 4 big names in order to try to get more. So I would see it more as, please come on. I mean, we're still here. We're going to be here. The tide is turning. Come invest now, and everything is going to be just fine and dandy. In his head, I mean, if you look at Scott Ritter or Douglas McGregor, the reality on the ground is really, really quite different. That's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, just to add one more comment, which I partially forgot, but I can use it as a segue in Ukraine recently. We've had a big turnover in the Zelensky circles, or administration, if you want to call it that. And one was around the helicopter crash that killed the interior minister of Ukraine and 10 others, or 9 others. And the day after, Zelensky dismissed a number of people in his circle, and then to conform to U.S. concerns about corruption in Ukraine. Suddenly, the U.S. is concerned about corruption in Ukraine, and it's taking place from a small right-wing cabal of U.S. congressmen, Tom Massey, Jordan, what's his first name? I can't remember, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others. And so suddenly the U.S. is interested is concerned about Ukrainian corruption. Ukraine was always said the sign outside Ukraine when you drove through Transnistria said, "Ukraine, the most corrupt country in Europe." It, in big neon. It was huge. Everybody knew about it. It was not, and the U.S. helped them become the most corrupt country in 2004 and even before that. So everybody was hip to that. Now these congressmen are really insignificant people, have put enough pressure on the situation domestically that now Ukraine is paying lip service to this corruption, so that Zelensky was once again had to dismiss more of his people, more of his circle. He's making enemies every day by dismissing these people. I mean, he's denying them their income, and so we'll have to see what the fallout is from that. Does anybody want to add to that, or?
Well, I'm curious. I'd like to ask you three, I mean, what your best guess is regarding what is behind the big turnover there. Is it the U.S.? I've heard, maybe I heard it on this show last week, that it could be, the U.S. trying to take more ownership of the government and putting in the people that they really want. I mean, what are your guys' best guess?
Well, there's certainly a history of that. There's certainly a history. Obviously, Victoria Nuland, she did not want the current mayor of Kiev to be president. Klitschko. She wanted Zelensky, and so was it Poroshenko? I think it was. Maybe
Yatsenyuk was the interim. She wanted Yatsenyuk, and then.
Oh, that's right. Earlier, yes, and they got it. So
yeah.
Certainly, Washington is calling the shots, and. Certainly, look, I don't want to sound optimistic about this, but it seems like, there's maybe no room for optimism, but it seems like the American people are finally waking up to what's happening here, and if the Russians can take Bakhmut and move a little further west, I think the U.S. for all the money it's putting in will start to lose the propaganda game, even more so than all my good days. I think they're losing it now, since there are people like us out here. But I think there's a lot more domestic pressure going on now, and it's not for good reasons. I'm not saying that the people that the congressmen who want to have the second church committee are doing it for the right reasons. They're obviously not.
Right.
They're doing it for the wrong reasons, and they include Steve Bannon, and they include some of the most powerful oligarchs in the world through Steve Bannon. The Scapes, the Mercers, the Kochs, the Go Weng Gui, the Hong Kong, the Chinese Hong Kong billionaire, and just among, you can see when people want to talk about MAGA, fuck MAGA. MAGA is nothing. MAGA is like, it's PR, okay? It's astroturf. It's fucking astroturf, just like the Tea Party, because those four entities that I mentioned, the Scapes, the Merchants, the Kochs, and the Hong Kong, Go and Weng Qi, that's $150 billion. Bannon's floating on cash. When Bannon was arrested, he was on Go's yacht, sitting sunbathing on Go's yacht. He's tight with these people. There's billions of dollars behind him, and that billions of dollars is now infiltrated itself into the halls of Congress because of the concessions that McCarthy made, so the little shit can be Speaker of the House, and so now we've got a situation where a true fascist element, and believe me, Bannon is pure fascist. I mean, comes right out of these Catholic cults, from European Catholic cults, and they have a foothold in the U.S. Congress that's growing. He's pleased as punch. He's smarter than they are, too.
I have a lot to add to the latest point, but I don't want to travel that far. So let's just bring it back to the purge in Kiev. And let's just look at a couple of things. I mean, Zelensky, he doesn't have a sovereign will of his own. I think everybody knows that. So American interference, as usual, is there. And there's two other things. About a week before the purge, Mr. Burns, Mr. CIA himself, was on a secret visit that 1 year later was public. So some secret visit that was. And then a couple of days before this happened, starting with the helicopter and Mr. Birdman Michael Keaton's escapades, was Boris Johnson, the harbinger of doom himself, the one who cancelled the previous negotiations back in, March last year? Yeah. So these are things coming together. But, I'd like to put an alternative theory, and all we can do is theory at this point. Alexander Mercouris and Alex, the Duran people, they say it's more like, the South Vietnamese scenario where their puppet is getting a bit unruly, and therefore they're going in to thin out, make him more isolated, and maybe in a bit to remove him, put someone else okay, that's a possibility. I wouldn't discard these kinds of people that have made up the government of just sociopathic self-interest. So while some of them may have been dismissed, others might have said, and there are documents saying, here's my letter, I quit, I bloody well quit, I quit now. I think the news coming in for them from around the world and from the battlefields is so bad, they say, okay, the game is over for me. I've got enough stuff, and it's time to leave the ship before everything sinks. That would be what I was, notwithstanding that the US is probably involved in the most corrupt democracy and the most impoverished nation in the world. I would say there's this element to it too, but this is something we might or might not ever really know. But there was definitely, we're talking 20 officials, 5 governors, and interestingly, they were not the top. They were almost always deputies of one ministerium or the other, but always 2 deputies here, 3 deputies here. It was like the middle people being forced out, dismissed, or quitting, depending on who you read. But it was an interesting purge. So American involvement for sure. But I think the paintings on the wall, as they say, not the paint, the paint. How is that proverb?
Writing.
The writings on the wall, sorry.
Well, so you bring up Vietnam and obviously the assassination of Diem,
Yeah.
and obviously the CIA. The record's out. They were behind the assassination. They uh, they organized the generals that organized the coup that ended up in Diem and his brother being murdered. Uh, my question would be: do you think they're bold enough to do that to Zelensky in Ukraine? That the CIA would step up and do it?
I'm not sure they would. Maybe they are painting him into a corner, but I'm not sure we're there with this conflict yet. But interestingly enough, if you want to know like a special date, there's Valery Gerasimov, now the leader of the special, well, we can call it a war, I think. And he had this date, February 1. Everything, all the military drills, the practices in Belarus have to be done by that day. All the material, all the people in Donbass around the contact line have to be prepared by that day. And that's why I think Zelensky is now very public and very much on the screen. This bid that we started with was to the Chamber of Commerce somewhere. I don't know which American state, but my sense was more about, rats escaping the sinking ship. But the US, completely doing the South Vietnam, I'm not sure. This guy is so public. They have so much invested in him. It's just maybe a warning shot, because they've been warning, don't just set your mind off Bakhmut. Don't send your troops. Don't send our new guns. They just wait, leave it, don't care. And he's still sending them like all the time. And maybe they're not happy with that aspect. Not sure. We are speculating here.
Yeah.
I definitely don't put it past the CIA to, knock off one of their proxy puppets. But I agree with Ben. Like, I don't think we're at that point yet. I don't think it's going to serve the Western interests to murder him. I mean, unless they try and pin it on Russia, which that could happen too as an escalation. But
then who's next?
Yeah. So I like Ben's analysis. It's just it's the it's the self-interested individuals realizing that they've wrung a maximum amount of personal benefit from whatever position they're in, and they want to get out before it starts, to damage their personal interests. That's a good explanation for what we see going on.
I'd certainly say so. When I read about this purge, I don't know if you want to not switch topics, but kind of shift them. But there's also been another purge that I've been made aware of. Now it's in Hungarian media, and it was about 170 top military officials purged from Hungary's upper echelons. And it seems to me both opposition and state media say they were the NATO-stan loyalists. Now, that's an interesting move. Their eastern neighbor is Ukraine on a tiny segment called Transcarpathia, where just an hour ago, Peter Szijjártó, our foreign minister, said in New York at the UN, whatever it is in New York, that Zelensky is brutally mobilizing ethnic Hungarians from that region, and most of the publicly available obituaries are from there. So when all of Europe is sending all their tanks, everything they've got to Ukraine on the side of Ukraine, maybe tiny Hungary, there are rumors, by the way, of Serbian and Hungarian military cooperation. Are we perhaps planning to stand up? Not that we have a huge economy or a huge country, but I mean, maybe we're the one people here who have learned our history not to send everything against Russia. Sorry, maybe a side point. I just wanted to bring that in. Eastern Europe, but we can go back to America.
Well, no, we mentioned 1956 and Hungary and the Soviet Union on this show, and I think those lessons stick with people. I would suspect. I wanted to go back to U.S. Congress, and I heard a very provocative statement from John Kiriakou on
CIA whistleblower.
Yeah, about who was being placed on the panels of the so-called Church Committee 2 in Congress by Jim Jordan, and Kiriakou said that he had a close friend who was an insider on the way the committees were formed and staffed, and he said they were largely being staffed by CIA people. And as we talked a little bit before the show, the CIA and the FBI, who are the main, the FBI is the main organization being scrutinized by this Church committee. So I hate using that because I had a great respect for Frank Church, and what he did was amazing. And all the CIA did was kill him. But that the CIA is the staff that's going to be on this committee that Jim Jordan's going to lead, and that the CIA and the FBI have been at each other's throats since the inception, actually since the OSS and Wild Bill Donovan, and Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. So they've been at each other's throats for decades. I mean, Dulles and Hoover really went at it. You want to read a great book that has some material on that, and I've heard everybody. I've heard anyway. I've heard a number of commentators mention this book as being a must. It's David Talbert's The Devil's Chessboard, and it's about John Foster. It's about Alan Dulles and the way he worked, and it's got a lot about his antipathy toward the FBI. So the idea now is for Bannon and the CIA to link up and take down the FBI, and it works to both of their advantage. First of all, it allows the CIA to work domestically any way they want, because the FBI is the stickler. I can remember one instance in Alfred McCoy's The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, the second edition, in which he mentions the DEA and the CIA in Afghanistan. And for a while, there were 14 DEA agents in Afghanistan, drug enforcement agents, an agency that actually Richard Nixon created. And there were 14 DEA agents in Afghanistan, and they were interfering. They were drug interdicting poppy and raw opium, and that was a CIA black ops operation to help fund their nefarious, affairs around the world. So the CIA stepped in, and they had 12 of the 14 DEA agents reassigned so that they could go on with their drug smuggling and poppy purchasing. And one of the more interesting facts about the war in Afghanistan is that when the Taliban did take over briefly for a 2-year period, the production of poppy fell to almost zero. They had no tolerance for it.
Yep.
But when they backed off and there was this agreement, and what is this? I can't remember his name now, Karmal and his brother who was a huge drug dealer. When they came back, the drug production went through the roof again, because the Taliban was not controlling the territory where the poppy growing was primarily done. So the CIA has tremendous power to do that sort of thing, and I think they want to use this committee as a knockout punch to the FBI. They want them out of the way, and what that forebodes, I don't know. But I'll tell you, it's no good. It's no good. And I'm not saying that the FBI is a great organization. They're full of shit, and they've made a lot of mistakes. But by the same token, this is a power play that we should watch very closely, I think.
We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back, and we'll further this conversation.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your product and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Welcome back to the Foreign Policy Review, a Parrot TV program, and I'm Dustin Pickering. We were discussing a lot of the CIA, trouble with CIA and the FBI here, and we have Billy Bob back with us, and I'm going to screw in this little guy here. There we are. How's it going, Billy?
So, yeah, my network's at 2G right now, so I apologize for the technical issues. And it was difficult for me to follow along with what Carlo was saying. I think he was talking about the Church Commission and the rivalry between the FBI and CIA. And the new Church Commission, the new Church Commission, I don't think is going to get to the bottom of things, right? It's political theater. It's Team Red is going to use it to go after Team Blue. They're not going to expose, they're not going to get to the truth of the matter. They're going to reveal, politically damaging things to help their brand and hurt the other brand. But ultimately, they're not on the side of the American people. I mean, that should be obvious.
Right.
Yeah, I think it is obvious. Maybe they are becoming one, just as NATO and the EU have announced in a joint statement that they're basically becoming one. The CIA, which was always the foreign arm, and FBI, the domestic arm, can finally be brought under a single rule. I don't know, but, it is a farce. It is not for the people, that's for sure, the new Church Committee.
Well, how about, can we discuss the way the U.S. people are being propagandized? I have a little bit on that.
What you guys think of this classified documents issue? They keep bringing it up. So somebody's like, got classified documents here. There's classified documents there.
They're everywhere now. Mike Pence is the latest, right?
Yeah, they're bringing this out against everybody, and I'm just trying to figure out what the issue is, what they're trying to accomplish with this. What are your thoughts on that, everybody?
Well, last week I pointed out, since I live in Washington, and by profession I'm a used and rare bookseller, I would get invited into people's homes, at people who dealt with classified information, and it was very often. I mean, I went into one home, and the guy had boxes of classified information in his basement. So look, 50 boxes, and I don't know whether it was declassified or not. But it goes a little deeper than that too. I mean, obviously there's very real little substance to this story, because declassified information is basically everywhere. As I pointed out, one of my customers, who was a Russian analyst, gave me his papers to read because he was so proud of the work he'd done, and they didn't have declassification stamped on them. They were just classified, So I read them, and we talked about them, and he liked to buy Lyman Kirkpatrick books, which is okay, because Lyman Kirkpatrick seemed to have a level-headed appreciation of the CIA. But if they're all over, so the point is that there's the point I wanted to make, and is that Obama attempted to, I think I mentioned this before, to to there's too much stuff that's called classified.
To ease the restrictions, I think.
There's stuff that's called classified that doesn't need to be classified. And Obama tried to rectify the situation, at least, and gave the veneer of trying to rectify it by having legislation passed when he was president that limited what could be classified. And I think three things. I have them somewhere on my
national security. I'm sure is one of them.
National security, right? And the other thing you can't do is and this is obvious, and this is that if you've committed a crime, you can't use declassification as an excuse for not admitting the crime. But of course, when you file a Freedom of Information Act request, if you ever get an answer at all, and they send you something, it's either usually inadequate or all of it's redacted out. It's all crossed out. So it's not changed, and actually more things are being marked declassified than ever before. So it's been ineffectual. So I think this whole notion of declassification is blown out of proportion. I don't think there's any.
Carlo, you're the last person I thought would be on here to exonerate Trump. So that's very interesting.
Hey, look at the events in order. First, it was Trump. Second, it was Biden and Hunter, like months after the event. And now it's Mike Pence. So back to Trump again, like ping pong between the two, well, the mono party, but the two wings of it. I don't know. It's very strange. But I know just in Europe, I'm very much for declassifying everything. There was a Bulgarian MP back in the health crisis who showed the actual contracts with Pfizer, the giants, that they were forced to sign. And it was what you imagine a redacted paper. You could look A, and everything else was black. And he said, how am I supposed to take this seriously? How is this a binding document? So yeah, that's probably not just an American problem. Just a little European context there.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Governments lie.
Yeah, they want to hide whatever they can hide. I think that's the major reason for declassification, and that's not going to change. Obviously, there's huge criminality going on in the U.S. government. It's in no way an honest broker in any sense of the word. It's just wall-to-wall lies. So
even if it's mostly unsuccessful, just ceremonial, at least you have FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests. At least nothing like that comparative exists in the US. Those documents we're just not going to know until 50 years.
And sometimes things slip through too, through FOIAs. So, I mean, they're worth doing and they're easy to do. I've never found them particularly useful. I haven't been sent the smoking gun. During Iran-Contra, Lawrence King, he's like a Washington insider lawyer. He was in charge of coming up with a synopsis, a working paper on Iran-Contra. This was before the Kerry subcommittee. And I talked an intern into I told her that I lied to her. I learned how to lie here in Washington. That I was worked for this company, and I was told that I could get a copy in advance because we were gonna write a favorable review of the document, and so I would have gotten it a week in advance. So I was all the way down at the National Press Building, sitting in a chair, waiting for her to bring it down to me. And then I finally got a phone call, and nope, they're not. I actually had to go to the phone. We didn't have cell phones then. I had to go to the phone and ask where it was because they were 10 or 15 minutes late. And they decided they couldn't let it go, and they weren't going to let it go. But I came, within a hair's breadth of getting that document. But
Yeah, there's a few people, their entire research model is based on, presenting FOIAs in a certain way to try and, get juicy stuff. But ultimately, if they don't want it to come out, it doesn't matter what the law says. It doesn't matter how they word their request. I mean, it's just not going to get released. They're going to deny they have it. So, Seth Rich, that's one of the interesting things was a lot of FOIA requests to try and get information on Seth Rich. And we know that at first they denied there was any documents related to Seth Rich. And then it turned out that that wasn't true and that there was, a bunch of stuff, but it's still unclear exactly what went on with the whole Seth Rich issue. But that's in the news again, right, guys?
Yep. And
for Europeans, Seth Rich was, correct me if I'm wrong, Hillary Clinton's aide that was, came to an unfortunate end. Is that?
Yeah, a campaign staffer.
Campaign staffer, sorry.
It's back in the air. Somebody sent me this. I'm not going to mention who because he may not want his name mentioned on air. But a Brian Huddleston is the plaintiff in a lawsuit against the FBI and the U.S. State Department of Justice. The U.S. State's Department of Justice, which is actually the Department of Justice. And Huddleston, let's see if I can call this paragraph up here. It kind of sums it all up. You have to excuse me. I don't really understand these machines. Okay, the introduction says, as its name indicates, defendant FBI's combined reply response to pending briefing regarding Seth Rich's laptops, hereinafter reply response, so on and so forth. The DKT number 83 merges two separate issues. Here's the meat. Namely, the releasability of documents from Seth Rich's personal laptop and Seth Rich's work laptop. In order to avoid confusion and expedite matters, the plaintiff will address only the work laptop and related documents in this response. And then the response goes on for about 20 pages, and I read it, and it's very meaty. It really picks apart the FBI's rationale that they've used for years now for not releasing the information. First, they denied they had them, and then now they're saying that they can't release the information. So the affidavit goes on to say, after years of denials, the FBI has finally admitted that Seth Rich is directly linked to the hack, and that's in quotes because it wasn't a hack, it was a leak, of the Democratic National Committee email services in 2016. The FBI has been in possession of a report about Seth Rich's work laptop for nearly 5 years, yet purportedly it did not discover that report until after Mr. Huddleston filed his motion to clarify. And then thirdly, it goes, the FBI had yet another technique heretofore undisclosed for hiding records from FOIA requesters, which goes back to Billy Bob's point. So this could be. Well, I don't want to say that. Nah. I got burned so bad on the smoking gun thing during Iran-Contra. I've been gun shy about it. I don't think anything can really come of it, but it's an interesting court case, and the affidavit itself is interesting to read, and I'll put a link to it.
And this gets back to Russiagate, right? So Russiagate was the claim that Russia hacked the DNC servers and
influenced social media against Hillary, I think.
And did they give? Did they say Russia gave the emails to WikiLeaks? I think they were saying that WikiLeaks got them from Russia, but Assange hinted very strongly that Seth Rich was his source. Of course, WikiLeaks doesn't burn their sources, so he didn't say it outright. but he implied that perhaps, Seth Rich might have been their source as opposed to, Russian agents. But yeah, so, and then, the Get Trump campaign was contingent on Russiagate, and if the truth would have come out that it wasn't the Russians that were helping Trump, it would have destroyed their whole 3-year psychological operation against democracy and against the voters of this country. But a lot, that's not to say Trump was a great guy and he was he's our country's savior, because
of course
nobody believes that.
I remember the most infamous part of that was like they had P tapes on Donald Trump. I remember that being in the news cycle, because Russians have stuff on him. That's why he's their man. Like Trump was their man.
They did say that. I remember that. Yeah.
Washington. I want to ask a question to the American panel, a quintessentially American question in this day and age when media is silenced. RT France was the latest, by the way, to be completely silenced, and you can be cancelled on social media for saying the wrong thing, especially in Europe. And with all of these FOIA requests going nowhere, court cases going nowhere, is there a way, like for a proper professional way for a Daniel Ellsberg to exist? Or is it just, Snowden and Julian Assange, who is rotting in a prison? Is there any muckraking, real breaking journalism possible in America today?
You can do it, but you'll probably be blocked at some point, or suffer some reprisal.
I think the internet in general and the blogosphere has taken over print media. I mean, you'd have to do it online. I'm sure, if you were doing any real investigative journalism, you'd have to release online. But eventually, I'm sure there'd be a backlash from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the question kind of supposes that there's a legal framework with which the ruling class will, hold themselves to. And if somebody just follows that legal framework, hey, there's nothing the ruling class can do. But that's just not reality. I mean, the reality is if it's a threat to the interests of the working class, they will put a stop to it one way or another, and that's what they did with Seth Rich. I mean, in my opinion, that's, of course, that might get us kicked off YouTube. Me saying that might cause this show not to be platformed, but
possibly.
Yeah.
And ironically, my wife and I talk about this sometimes. It's almost easier to control the internet as far as getting the word out than it was when back in the day, you just mimeographed something and stood on the side.
Documents, paper, photographs.
I do want to, when you mentioned Daniel Ellsberg, recently he said, if they're going to keep Assange in jail, they got to arrest me too. And
he said that.
Ellsberg was one of my most dour customers. I don't think I ever said one word to him outside of that's okay. That'll be like 1995. And, so, but when the Pentagon Papers should be telling the American people something, especially about the way the war is going. And I have a favorite book, which I've already touted on this show, and I'm going to tout it again, about statistics. I did it when we had Scott Ritter on one of the appearances. It's called The Perfect War. And then hardback, the subtitle is I can't remember. It went out of my head as soon as I said it. Anyway, the subtitle to the paperback is The War We Couldn't Lose and How We Did. And what this book is, it's a critique of MACB and SOG. MACB being the main information gathering center for statistics on Vietnam of kill rates and that sort of thing. And SOG being Special Operations Group, which were the people in the field who were to send the data back to MACB to be gathered and organized and presented. And one of the things that the Pentagon Papers pointed out was now other research is that it was impossible, that information made no sense. At one point, for the numbers to make any sense, one statistician stated that every man, woman, and child, and every oxen in Vietnam would have had to been killed for those statistics to make any sense. And this and Vietnam should be a cautionary tale, because that's the way the propaganda on what's happening in Ukraine is being dished out now. It's based on statistics, and it's based on false numbers. I mean, if you were in the field and you were walking down, with 2 rice paddies on the other side, and an oxen came toward you and you shot it, SOG told you to report it as a kill. And you go, yeah, but it was an oxen. No, report it as a kill. We need to keep the quotas up. We have quotas, and we've got to maintain those quotas to keep the money rolling in, which was largely stolen. And that's the way it went. So books like James William Gibson's The Perfect War are essential if you want to understand how, you can see I got 57 places marked in this thing. If you want to understand just how you're being lied to at a very fundamental level, when you hear, when I'm kibitz with people and they say, "Well, I'm glad because 100,000 Russian soldiers have died." But where did you get that figure from?
From Kiev, because that's the new SOG.
Yeah, did you pull it out of your ass, or did you get it from somebody else's ass? It's like
the statement that's they're lies, damn lies, and then their statistics.
Exactly. So
I don't appreciate your implication that the Ghost of Kiev didn't destroy 30 Russian MiGs. That's
and the pickle
as
jar
hard of a
babushka.
fact as you can get.
Pickle jar babushka was smashing tanks. The Ghost Island people, they took on the Russian destroyer. There was a couple of these. I think there was a goat of Kiev later too. That was just desperate, but there was a goat, a heroic goat.
They rang a few days of propaganda out of that whole Snake Island thing, and then even after the whole story fell apart, because instead of, they said that they died fighting, right? They weren't going to surrender, and they said, "Fuck you, Russia."
We lost connectivity and we were all booted out. It must have been the "fuck you" with Billy Bob's "fuck you." Sorry, I'm pulling everybody back up. Let's get us up here again. We were all booted out. Thank you, Billy Bob, for the "fuck you." I think they kicked us all out for that.
I think that was great, but yep.
I'm waiting for Carlo to join us again. It says his devices are not connected. That sometimes happens. We lose connectivity and it drops everybody. It's happened once or twice. Carlo's coming back on another device. I'm not sure what the issue with that is. It just dropped everybody, and I was like, blob flew through and disconnected everyone's internet briefly. Here's Carlo again. So what were we saying here?
Well, I was mentioning Snake Island and how that whole story fell apart, but the media just ignored, like weeks after, months after their story fell apart, they just ignored that their story fell apart, and they would still talk about it like it was a story. Like, they didn't go ahead and prefer to die than to surrender. They actually surrendered, and then they, ended up in a prisoner swap. And so why was that a story to begin with? I don't know, but they did wring about 3 days worth of propaganda out of it. But that's what you expect.
People believe the most absurd things.
It took half a year, but at least the Ghost of Kiev, they came out and said that was invented. It was a psychological operation. They never did that with Snake Island.
That's true.
And that's how people believe they're winning in the West.
Well, in Vietnam, Ed Lansdale, the famous Ed Lansdale, CIA operative, he convinced 12 million Catholics in the North to march to the South because the Mary of the Blessed Mother, or whatever she's called, had left the North and gone to the South. So 12 million Catholics got off. Well, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't 12 million. Maybe it was 2 million. probably at that time there was only 37 million people in Vietnam. I'd say 2 million. They marched to the south. It was like it wasn't pleasant, and it's just on this nonsense around religion. So I guess American people are. I mean, somebody should like write a book about all the absurd things. Reagan, he said that the Sandinistas, this is a country at the time had 3.2 million people. They were going to come up through Harbin, Texas, and take over the United States. The Sandinistas, Nicaragua. It's just so absurd, just utter absurdity, and people were buying it. There was, and you have the people that enable these lies. The Alsop brothers, we called them Allslop when Vietnam was around, because they would just take those lies and they'd run with them in the Washington Post. So, and this Post has, if anything, it's gotten worse. But
I repeat, we did not trade weapons for hostages. I repeat.
Yes. Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
I heard that. I don't remember.
And we won't do it again. And we won't do it again.
Yeah.
I got a real shocker the other day. I'm noodling around, and the woman who exposed the October surprise, Barbara Honegger, who was absolutely pilloried by the U.S. press. She's still an activist, and she's still doing it. She was absolutely right about the October surprise. She was right on the fucking money about it. So it was good to see her still in action. April Oliver, the woman who exposed the fact that sarin gas was used in Vietnam. They absolutely destroyed her career. They destroyed Gary Webb's career. When it comes to April Oliver, at the time, I took maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I found a manifest from a U.S. Navy merchant vessel, and on the manifest, it clearly said sarin gas, and it was destination. The destination was Vietnam. So being an idiot at the time, I sent it to the mainstream press. Of course, the next time I went to look for the manifest, it was gone. It was the primitive days of computers. It was just gone. So, that was back in the 80s when she made these accusations around, I can't remember the name of the senator who apparently was accused of going in and part of a night operation for the Phoenix program, killed a 90-year-old man in his sleep or something. It was that, it was just a story for a time. But anyway, this has been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. If people want to know how they're being lied to, go back to William Gibson's A Perfect War. Highly recommended.
I like this circle that we've drawn, basically going back to the initial proxy war that the US lost. It wasn't a blunder, a little, mistake. Yeah. It was they lost. And that brings us to 2022. Like, I think Karl Marx said it when he said history repeats first as tragedy and second as farce. I think Zelensky should take note, and Europe should most likely take note.
Yes.
We have about a minute into the program left to go. Thanks, guys. This has been a wonderful discussion.
I was just going to say that's a great place to wrap it up on that point.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely. So thanks for watching the Foreign Policy Review. Be back Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Subscribe to our channel, guys. If you're watching right now and you're not commenting and subscribing, you're not participating. So please do. And do remember to do some research of your own. Check out some of these books that Carlo talks about and references. And we'll love to hear your comments someday, viewers out there watching. And again, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching the Foreign Policy Review. And we'll be back again next Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Thanks again for watching.